Lieutenant Commander Sarah had always been good at blending in. At 5 feet 6 inches with shoulder-length black hair and a quiet demeanor, she looked like any other professional woman enjoying a Friday night out in San. The dimly lit sports bar near the naval base buzzed with conversation, clinking glasses, and the distant sound of a baseball game on multiple screens. Sarah sat alone at the far end of the bar, nursing a club soda while reviewing mission documents on her tablet, disguised as casual reading. She had chosen this particular spot deliberately. Tomorrow morning, she would brief a team of 12 elite Navy SEALs for Operation Neptune's Gate, a classified mission that would take them deep into hostile territory. Tonight was her last chance to review the final intelligence reports and contingency plans without the formality of her office or the curious eyes of her subordinates. The bar provided perfect cover, just another civilian unwinding after a long work week. Sarah had earned her position through 15 years of relentless dedication, starting as a naval intelligence officer fresh out of Annapolis. She had volunteered for every dangerous assignment, completed multiple tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and eventually became one of the few women to command special operations units. Her record was spotless, her tactical mind sharp as a blade, and her ability to remain calm under pressure legendary among her peers. But tonight, she just wanted to be anonymous. The mission weighing on her mind was unlike any she had commanded before. Intelligence suggested that a terrorist cell had acquired advanced weaponry and was planning an attack on American interests overseas. Her team would need to infiltrate their compound, gather evidence, and neutralize the threat without international incident. Every detail had to be perfect because failure meant not just mission compromise, but potentially American lives lost. As she scrolled through satellite imagery on her tablet, Sarah noticed 3 young men at a nearby table growing increasingly loud and boisterous. They wore casual civilian clothes, but something about their bearing and short haircuts suggested military background. Their conversation drifted her way in fragments, mentions of training exercises, upcoming deployments, and the usual complaints about military life that every service member shared in private moments. The tallest of the 3, a man with broad shoulders, gestured wildly as he told what was apparently a humorous story about a training mishap. His companions laughed heartily, clearly enjoying their evening off. They seemed like good soldiers, young, eager, probably recently graduated from basic training or specialized programs. Sarah felt a maternal instinct toward all the young sailors and Marines she encountered, knowing that many of them would face real danger under her command. One of the young men, a redhead with freckles and an infectious grin, stood up to order another round of drinks. He moved with the confident swagger of someone who had probably been drinking for several hours. His balance was slightly off as he approached the bar, though he was far from intoxicated. The bartender, a grizzled veteran with Navy tattoos covering his forearms, served the drinks with practiced efficiency. Sarah continued her work, occasionally glancing up to observe the crowd. Military bars near bases always had this same atmosphere, service members trying to forget the pressures of their duties, civilians who worked on base mixing with uniformed personnel, and the underlying current of camaraderie that bound military communities together. She had spent countless evenings in similar establishments throughout her career, sometimes celebrating successful missions, sometimes mourning fallen comrades. The redhead carefully balanced 3 full beer mugs as he made his way back to the table. Sarah noticed his slightly unsteady gait but thought nothing of it. These things happened in bars every night around the world. She returned her attention to the mission files, cross-referencing intelligence reports with tactical assessments her team had prepared. The collision happened in slow motion from Sarah's perspective. The redhead, focused on not spilling the drinks, failed to notice another patron stepping back from the bar. His foot caught on a chair leg, sending him stumbling forward just as Sarah reached for her tablet charger on the bar. The 3 beer mugs flew from his hands in different directions, their contents spraying across several nearby patrons, but the majority of the cold liquid drenched Sarah from head to toe. Beer soaked through her light blue blouse, dripped from her hair, and pooled on her tablet screen. The smell of hops and barley filled her nostrils as she instinctively closed her eyes against the cascade. Conversations around the bar stopped mid-sentence as everyone turned to observe the accident. Sarah sat motionless for a moment, processing what had just happened while beer continued to drip from her clothes onto the floor. The 3 young men rushed over immediately, faces red with embarrassment and genuine concern. They began apologizing profusely, grabbing napkins from nearby tables and offering them to Sarah. The man looked as he surveyed the damage, while the third member of their group, a quiet brunette, immediately flagged down the bartender for towels. Their friend who had caused the accident stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing without sound as he struggled to find adequate words. "Ma'am, I am so incredibly sorry," the redhead finally managed, his voice cracking slightly. "I don't know what happened. I do know what happened, but I don't know how it happened. Are you okay? Are you hurt? Can we pay for dry cleaning? Can we buy you dinner? I feel terrible about this." Sarah carefully wiped beer from her tablet screen, relieved to see that the device still functioned. Her mission documents remained safely stored in encrypted files, though she would need to ensure no liquid had damaged the internal components. She looked up at the three anxious faces surrounding her and recognized something in their expressions that confirmed her earlier suspicion. These were her SEALs. Not all of them, certainly, but she had studied the personnel files extensively in preparation for tomorrow's briefing. There was Petty Officer Second Class Jake, explosives specialist with an exemplary record but a noted tendency toward overconfidence. The quiet brunette was Petty Officer First Class, sniper and reconnaissance expert known for his attention to detail and calm demeanor. And the redhead who had baptized her in beer was Petty Officer Third Class Tommy, communications specialist and the youngest member of her team. "Really, ma'am, we'll make this right," Jake continued, his leadership instincts kicking in as he took charge of the situation. "Tommy here just got back from deployment and we're celebrating, but that's no excuse for not watching where we're going. Are you sure you're not hurt? That was a lot of beer." Sarah carefully considered her options. She could reveal her identity now, which would certainly shock them and likely ruin their evening off. She could accept their apologies gracefully and continue her anonymous review of mission materials elsewhere. Or she could use this unexpected opportunity to observe her team members in an unguarded moment, learning things about their characters that no personnel file could reveal. Handed her a stack of clean bar towels while studying her face with the analytical gaze that made him an excellent sniper. "You look familiar," he said slowly. "Do you work on base? I feel like I've seen you somewhere before." "I might look like someone you know," Sarah replied carefully, dabbing at her soaked clothing. "Don't worry about it. Accidents happen, especially in crowded places like this." Tommy finally found his voice again. "Ma'am, please let us at least buy you a drink and pay for your dry cleaning. I feel absolutely terrible about this. My mom would kill me if she knew I had doused a lady in beer and then just walked away. She raised me better than that." The sincerity in his voice touched Sarah more than she expected. These young men were genuinely good people, not just skilled soldiers. That character assessment would prove valuable in the challenges ahead. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I was actually finishing up here anyway. No harm done." Jake shook his head firmly. "With all due respect, ma'am, there's definitely harm done. Your clothes are soaked, you smell like a brewery, and your tablet got drenched. The least we can do is buy you dinner and make sure you get home safely. It's the right thing to do." Sarah found herself impressed by their collective insistence on making amends. In her experience, many young might have offered a quick apology and retreated to their table, but these three seemed genuinely committed to taking responsibility for the accident. That spoke well of their character and their potential performance under pressure. "All right," she conceded, "but just one drink and then I really do need to get going. I have an early morning tomorrow." The relief on their faces was almost comical. Tommy practically sprinted to get her a fresh club soda while Jake helped clean the remaining beer from her tablet and personal belongings. They insisted she join them at their table, which gave Sarah the perfect opportunity to observe their group dynamics and individual personalities without the formal structure of a military briefing. As they settled into conversation, Sarah learned that all three had been selected for a special mission, but hadn't yet met their commanding officer. They speculated about what kind of operation required their particular skill sets and wondered aloud about their new commander's reputation and leadership style. Their comments revealed both professional curiosity and underlying nervousness about the unknown challenges ahead. Tommy leaned forward conspiratorially, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I heard our new commanding officer is supposed to be this legendary tactical genius. Someone said they've never lost a mission, not even the really dangerous ones in Afghanistan and Iraq, but nobody seems to know much about them personally." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "My buddy in intelligence mentioned that our co has this reputation for being incredibly thorough and demanding perfection from everyone on the team. Apparently, They study every team member's file like they're preparing for a doctoral thesis. Kind of intimidating, you know. Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral while internally nodding their concerns. She had indeed studied their files extensively, but not out of some obsessive need for control. Understanding each team member's strengths, weaknesses, and psychological profile was essential for mission success and keeping them alive. Still, she found their perspective enlightening. Ever the analytical one stirred his drink thoughtfully. What bothers me isn't the reputation for being demanding. I want a co who expects excellence. What worries me is the rumors about them being distant and unapproachable. Special operations require trust and communication. If we can't connect with our commander on a human level, how can we function effectively as a unit? Connect on a human level? Sarah asked, genuinely curious about their perspective. What does that mean to you? Well, explained, in combat situations, you're not just following orders from some voice on the radio. You're trusting someone with your life and the lives of your teammates. I need to know that my co sees us as people, not just tactical assets to be moved around on a chessboard. Does that make sense? Sarah nodded, though their words stung slightly. She had always prided herself on caring deeply about her team members' welfare, but perhaps her professional demeanor had been interpreted as emotional distance. Have you had commanders before who treated you like chess pieces? Tommy laughed bitterly. Oh yeah, I had this one lieutenant who used to refer to us by our specialties instead of our names. Communications, get over here. Explosives, handle that door. Like we weren't actual human beings with thoughts and feelings and families back home. It made everyone feel disposable. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Jake agreed. When you're about to risk everything for a mission, you want to know that your commander values you as a person, not just for what you can contribute to the objective. A good leader makes you feel like you matter. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, with the three young SEALs sharing stories about previous commanders, both good and bad. Sarah listened carefully, learning valuable lessons about leadership and team dynamics that no command school had ever taught her. She began to understand that her team needed more than just tactical brilliance and professional competence. They needed to feel valued, understood, and connected to their mission and their leader. As the evening progressed, Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying their company. Tommy had an infectious sense of humor and could find something amusing in almost any situation. Jake possessed natural leadership qualities and a protective instinct toward his teammates that would serve them well in dangerous situations. Combined sharp intelligence with thoughtful introspection, making him an ideal advisor and voice of reason during high-stress moments. Their conversation eventually drifted from work-related topics to more personal subjects. Tommy shared stories about growing up in a large Irish family in Boston, explaining his tendency to talk too much when nervous. Jake described his childhood in rural Montana and how military service had opened up a world beyond ranching and farming. Spoke quietly about his immigrant parents' sacrifices and his determination to honor their memory through distinguished service. Sarah found herself sharing carefully edited versions of her own experiences, describing her journey through the military without revealing her current position. She spoke about the challenges of proving herself in male-dominated environments and the satisfaction of overcoming obstacles through persistence and skill. The young men listened respectfully, asking thoughtful questions that revealed their maturity and open-mindedness. You know, Jake said suddenly, you'd probably get along great with our new co. You have this same kind of quiet confidence and attention to detail. Plus, you ask really good questions that make us think about things differently. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Oh, and what makes you think your commanding officer has those qualities? Just little things we've heard, explained. Like how they supposedly spend hours studying not just mission parameters, but also the personal backgrounds and psychological profiles of team members. Most commanders just want to know if you can do your job. This one apparently cares about understanding who you are as a person. Maybe that's not distance, Tommy suggested thoughtfully. Maybe that's actually caring so much that they want to understand everything about us before putting us in danger. I mean, if someone took the time to really learn about my background and my family and my motivations, I'd feel pretty valued, wouldn't you? Sarah felt a warm sensation in her chest, realizing that her careful preparation was being interpreted more charitably than she had expected. Perhaps her team would be more receptive to her leadership style than she had feared. The bartender announced last call, and the three SEALs reluctantly prepared to leave. They had insisted on paying for Sarah's drinks and had even arranged for a taxi to ensure she got home safely. Their genuine concern and gentlemanly behavior impressed her more than any commendation or performance review ever could. As they stood to leave, paused and looked at Sarah intently. "I'm still trying to figure out where I know you from. Are you sure you don't work in naval intelligence or special operations? There's something about your questions and the way you analyze situations that seems really familiar." Sarah's heart rate increased slightly, but she maintained her composure. "I work in a government position that requires security clearance, so I can't really discuss details. But I move around different departments fairly regularly, so maybe our paths have crossed professionally." Jake nodded understandingly. "That makes sense. Well, it's been really nice talking with someone who understands the military lifestyle. Most civilians just don't get what we go through, you know." They exchanged polite goodbyes, with Tommy apologizing one final time for the beer incident. Sarah watched them leave, noting how they naturally fell into a protective formation around each other as they walked through the parking lot. Even off-duty and slightly intoxicated, their training and mutual loyalty remained evident. Back in her apartment later that evening, Sarah changed into dry clothes and reflected on the unexpected encounter. She had learned more about her team members in one accidental meeting than months of formal evaluations could have revealed. More importantly, she had gained insights into their expectations and concerns about her leadership that would prove invaluable in the coming mission. She spent the remaining hours before dawn revising her briefing notes, incorporating what she had learned about their personalities and motivations. The mission parameters remained unchanged, but her approach to presenting them would be dramatically different. Instead of focusing solely on tactical objectives and operational procedures, she would emphasize the human elements that her team clearly valued. Sarah also made a mental note to be more conscious of her interpersonal style during the mission. Her team needed to see her as more than just a competent commander. They needed to feel connected to her as a person. That connection could mean the difference between success and failure when they found themselves in life-threatening situations thousands of miles from home. As sunrise approached, Sarah prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most interesting mission briefings of her career. She wondered how her three new acquaintances would react when they discovered the true identity of the woman they had drenched in beer and spent the evening trying to impress with their gentlemanly behavior. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. In trying to remain anonymous and observe her team from a distance, she had inadvertently created the kind of personal connection that it said was so important for effective leadership. Sometimes the best intelligence came from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes the most valuable lessons were learned in the most unlikely circumstances. Sarah checked her watch and began gathering her materials for the morning briefing. In just a few hours, she would face her team as their commanding officer for the first time. Thanks to a clumsy accident with 3 beer mugs, she now had insights that would help her lead them more effectively than she had ever imagined possible. The mission ahead would test all of them in ways they couldn't yet anticipate, but Sarah felt more confident about their chances of success. She had seen their character, their loyalty to each other, and their capacity for growth. More importantly, she understood what they needed from her as their leader. The evening had been an unexpected gift wrapped in the chaos of spilled beer and embarrassed apologies. The briefing room fell silent at exactly 800 hours as Sarah walked through the door in her crisp naval uniform, carrying herself with the quiet authority that had earned her respect throughout the special operations community. 12 elite Navy SEALs sat around the conference table, their attention immediately focusing on their new commanding officer. She could see recognition dawning on 3 familiar faces in the back row. Tommy's jaw dropped so far that had to reach over and gently close it for him. Jake's eyes widened in disbelief as he processed the impossible coincidence. The woman they had spent the previous evening trying to impress with their courtesy and charm was Lieutenant Commander Sarah, the legendary tactical genius who would be leading them into one of the most dangerous missions of their careers. Sarah allowed herself a small smile as she set her briefing materials on the table. "Good morning. I'm Lieutenant Commander, and I'll be leading Operation Neptune's Gate. Before we begin, I want to thank petty officers and for their exceptional hospitality last evening. I haven't been treated so well after a workplace accident in quite some time." The rest of the team looked confused, but the 3 young men in question appeared ready to disappear through the floor. Tommy's face had turned a shade of red that rivaled his hair, while Jake seemed to be questioning every life choice that had led him to this moment. True to his analytical nature, was clearly trying to calculate exactly how much trouble they were in for unknowingly socializing with their commanding officer. "Relax," Sarah continued, her tone warm but professional. "Last night was off the record and your conduct was exemplary. In fact, it gave me valuable insights that will help make this mission more successful. But we'll discuss that later. Right now, we have work to do." She moved to the wall-mounted screen and began the formal briefing. Operation Neptune's Gate is a joint intelligence gathering and neutralization mission targeting a terrorist cell operating out of a compound in the mountains of eastern Syria. Our intelligence suggests they have acquired advanced weapons systems and are planning an attack on American interests within the next 2 weeks. The mission overview unfolded with the precision and thoroughness that had made Sarah's reputation. Satellite imagery revealed the target compound's layout, defensive positions, and patrol patterns. Intelligence reports detailed the terrorist organization's hierarchy, capabilities, and likely response scenarios. Whether data, extraction routes, and contingency plans were presented with meticulous attention to detail. But unlike her previous briefings, Sarah made a conscious effort to connect each tactical element to the human beings who would be executing it. When discussing the compound's defensive positions, she explained not just where the guards were stationed, but what kind of training and equipment they likely possessed, helping her team understand the human adversaries they would face. "The mission timeline is tight," Sarah continued. "We'll insert via helicopter at 200 local time, approach the compound on foot using natural terrain features for concealment, and establish surveillance positions by 400. The primary objective is to gather intelligence on their weapons cache and communication systems. Secondary objectives include identifying key personnel and, if possible, capturing the cell leader for interrogation." She paused to scan the faces around the table, noting the mix of concentration, excitement, and nervous energy that preceded every dangerous mission. These were experienced professionals who had faced combat situations before, but each new operation brought its own unique risks and challenges. "Now," Sarah said, her tone shifting slightly, "based on some informal conversations I had last night, I understand there may have been concerns about communication and leadership style on this team. I want to address those concerns directly." Tommy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly remembering his comments about commanders who treated their teams like chess pieces. Jake and exchanged glances, wondering how much of their conversation Sarah had taken to heart. "Special operations succeed or fail based on trust," Sarah continued. "You need to trust my judgment, my planning, and my commitment to bringing all of you home safely. But equally important, I need to trust your skills, your dedication, and your ability to adapt when situations don't go according to plan. Trust is built through understanding, and understanding requires communication." She moved away from the screen and leaned against the table, adopting a more conversational posture. "So let me tell you what I know about each of you, not from your personnel files, but from my observations and research." Sarah's gaze moved to Tommy first. "You have an extraordinary ability to maintain communications under pressure, but you also have a tendency to doubt yourself when things get chaotic. Your strength isn't just technical skill, it's your capacity to stay human and connected even in the worst situations. That humanity is an asset, not a weakness." Tommy's mouth opened and closed again, but this time from surprise rather than embarrassment. No commanding officer had ever described his personality traits as tactical assets. Sarah continued, looking at Jake, "You have natural leadership instincts and a protective streak that makes others want to follow you. But you also have a tendency toward overconfidence that could put the team at risk if not properly channeled. Your job on this mission isn't just handling explosives, it's helping me read the team's morale and psychological state." Jake nodded slowly, beginning to understand that Sarah saw leadership as a shared responsibility rather than a top-down hierarchy. She said, turning to, "Your analytical mind and attention to detail make you an exceptional sniper, but more importantly, they make you an excellent advisor. When I'm focused on the big picture, I need someone watching for the details I might miss. Don't hesitate to speak up if you see something that doesn't look right." Felt a surge of respect for this commanding officer who had somehow identified his greatest strength and given him explicit permission to use it. Sarah addressed the rest of the team with similar personal insights, demonstrating that she had studied not just their tactical capabilities, but their individual personalities and motivations. Each man began to understand that he was valued not just for his technical skills, but for his unique contribution to the team's overall effectiveness. "Now," Sarah said, returning to the mission details, "let's talk about what could go wrong and how we'll handle it." The next 2 hours were spent in intensive tactical planning. Sarah presented multiple contingency scenarios and asked the team to develop solutions collaboratively. She encouraged questions, challenged assumptions, and made it clear that every team member's input was valuable. The atmosphere in the room gradually shifted from formal military hierarchy to engaged problem-solving collaboration. Tommy found himself speaking up more confidently as he realized his communication expertise was genuinely valued. Jake offered tactical suggestions that Sarah incorporated into the mission plan without hesitation, pointed out potential vulnerabilities that led to significant improvements in their approach strategy. As the briefing concluded, Sarah assigned specific responsibilities and established communication protocols. But she also made sure each team member understood how his individual mission contributed to the overall objective and the safety of his teammates. She said as they prepared to leave for final equipment checks, "I want you to know that commanding this team is both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Your safety and the mission's success depend on all of us working together with complete trust and open communication. If you have concerns, questions, or suggestions at any point, I expect you to voice them." Tommy raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, I have to ask. Last night, when we were talking about what we wanted in a commanding officer, were you taking notes for this briefing?" Sarah laughed, and the sound surprised everyone, including herself. "Not exactly, but I was learning things about leadership that I couldn't have learned any other way. You taught me that being a good commander isn't just about tactical knowledge and strategic thinking. It's about understanding and valuing the people you're leading." Jake leaned forward. "So you're saying that dumping beer on you was actually good for team building?" "I'm saying," Sarah replied with a grin, "that sometimes the best intelligence comes from the most unexpected sources, and sometimes the most important lessons are learned outside the classroom." The team began to disperse for final preparations, but the three young men lingered behind. They approached Sarah with a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity still evident on their faces. "Ma'am," said quietly, "we're sorry about last night. We had no idea who you were, and we probably said things that were inappropriate." Sarah shook her head. "You said exactly what I needed to hear. You were honest about your expectations and concerns, and that honesty is going to make this mission more successful. Don't apologize for being genuine." Tommy grinned sheepishly. "My mom is going to die laughing when I tell her I dumped beer on my commanding officer the night before a major mission." "Tell your mother," Sarah said seriously, "that the accident led to the best pre-mission intelligence briefing I've ever received. And tell her she raised a son who takes responsibility for his mistakes and treats people with respect. That's the kind of character that wins battles." As the three young SEALs left the briefing room, they walked with a different bearing than they had the night before. They now understood that their commanding officer saw them as complete human beings, not just tactical resources. More importantly, they had learned that effective leadership was a collaborative effort that required trust, communication, and mutual respect. The mission launch was still 12 hours away, but Sarah felt more confident about their chances of success than she had about any previous operation. The accidental meeting in the bar had created exactly the kind of personal connection that had said was so important for effective teamwork. Sometimes the best preparation for facing unknown dangers together was getting to know each other as people first. That evening, as final preparations continued, Sarah reflected on the strange turn of events that had transformed a simple intelligence review into a leadership and team dynamics. 3 spilled beer mugs had taught her more about commanding special operations teams than years of formal military education. The mission ahead would test all of them in ways they couldn't anticipate, but they would face those challenges as a unified team that understood and valued each member's contribution. And if they succeeded, it would be partly because a clumsy accident in a crowded bar had brought them together as people before they had to trust each other with their lives.